Better Call Saul ended in August of 2022, sending fans of Vince Gilligan's world and executives at Cinnabon into a deep depression. But the benefit of time has afforded us a chance to take a big step back and ask ourselves,
What's it all mean? What's the point?
we could begin trying to answer that question in a number of different places. The symbols, the costumes, the greatest
Now
quotes,
they're
those are
minerals.
all decent options. But at the end of the day, both shows are anchored to their main characters, Walter Hartwell White and James Morgan McGill. Temperamentally, the men are completely opposite. When Saul strolls into Walter's classroom against the advice of Mike with the intention of becoming Walter's money launderer, he says,
I was terrible at chemistry. I'm more of a humanities guy.
many of their personality differences can be summed up by that line. Jimmy wields magnetic charisma and a gift for pragmatism. Walter's social skills are not quite as advanced.
Walt, what's wrong with you?
But given that Walter's adolescence was spent in a lab, his inferiority to Jimmy in that regard is not shocking. But despite their personality differences, the character arcs of Jimmy and Walter have many parallels, and those parallels configure what I see as the overarching message of the Breaking Bad universe. Now, there is a debate surrounding what the title of the universe should be, the Gilligan verse, the Albuquerque verse, whatever it's called, but I think Breaking Bad makes the most sense since both television shows are studies in how and why human beings decay morally. Walter White's story is given that title, but it also extends to the characters around him. Jesse becomes a murderer, Skylar launders drug money, and participates in this scene.
Happy birthday.
That's not to say that Skylar and Jesse venture deeper into the abyss than Walter, but they break the ethical boundaries they would have set for themselves in episode 1. Sometimes for understandable reasons, of course. It is important for your boss to have an enjoyable birthday party. The two central characters of Better Call Saul embark on a similar journey. The primary timeline of Better Call Saul is about how Jimmy, inch by inch, surrenders to his worst impulses, which are embodied by Saul Goodman. And Jimmy's transformation can't be completed without Kim becoming his deputy in crime. The overarching story asks the audience a couple questions. What conditions contribute to the growth of Walt and Jimmy's narcissistic and destructive behavior, and how can we arm ourselves against those conditions? At the beginning of Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul, our characters are not in a position of power. Walt is a disrespected high school teacher who moonlights at a car wash. Jimmy is a public defender who nobody takes seriously. But both men can imagine their ideal self. Jimmy wants to be a wealthy and respected lawyer, mostly to get Chuck's approval, and Walter wants to be like Elliot, his former partner who turned Gray Matter into a multi-billion-dollar corporation. Walter even checks the stock price of Gray Matter every week to feel his distance from Elliot. And this weekly ritual breeds extreme resentment towards Elliot and his wife Gretchen. Walt's cancer diagnosis gives him an excuse to burn that pent up hatred and resentment, and he uses the resulting energy to become a man who's capable of doing badass stuff like this. Sorry, run clip. But eventually the excuse runs its course. In the 9th episode of season 2, Walt learns that his experimental cancer treatment has worked and he's in remission. When this happens, Walt must make a choice about his identity. He can either hang up the black hat and choose to support his family through legal means, or allow the Heisenberg persona to fully conquer Mr. Chips. Jimmy's life is the inverse of Walter's in many ways. Instead of playing life too safe, he lives carefree and erratically, culminating with the Chicago sunroof and subsequent threat of becoming labeled a sex offender. Chuck flies out to save his brother's ass. His facial expressions communicate his feelings about that mission, but he manages to strike a deal with Jimmy.
If I do this, do not make a fool out of me.
This deal with Chuck is Jimmy's reverse cancer diagnosis. Jimmy gravitated towards reckless, self-indulgent behavior from a young age because he constantly watched his father be exploited by men who live by a wolves and sheep mentality. Jimmy runs as far away as possible from his dad's example. But after being rescued by Chuck, Jimmy has a powerful reason to abandon his Slip and Jimmy lifestyle. He loves his brother and doesn't want to let him down. Jimmy even works towards a law degree to make Chuck proud. In season 1 of Better Call Saul, Jimmy relies on his Chicago skills to cut corners, but he does restrain himself for Chuck's sake. However, like Walt's cancer diagnosis, this motivating factor dies. Jimmy discovers that Chuck wants to cripple his potential, Tuco style, because
Slipping Jimmy with a law degree is like a chimp with a machine gun.
When this truth comes out, Jimmy must make a choice about his identity. Since satisfying Chuck is no longer a sufficient reason to live a lawful life, he can either revert to his slip and Jimmy ways, or prove his brother wrong by making Jimmy McGill a well respected name in Albuquerque law. It does not take long for Jimmy to make his decision.
I know what stopped me. And you know what? It's never stopping me again.
Even after these decisions, the Walter of Season 3 is far from the kingpin who orders hits in Season 5, and the Jimmy of Season 2 is not close to becoming a criminal lawyer. Their behavior continues to be restrained. For Walter, the reason is family. He wants to keep his marriage and children. For Jimmy, it's Kim Wexler. She lives by a moral code closer to Chuck's, and he doesn't want to alienate her by acting too outlandishly. These restraints end up being too weak. Once Walter discovers that Jesse is cooking blue sky for Gus, his pride ropes him back into the game. He can't allow Jesse to become another Elliot. Now, Walt knows that cooking for Gus means the end of his marriage, so he signs off on the divorce papers. For me, this is Walt's point of no return. If a point of no return could be identified for Jimmy, it would be Chuck's death. The fire doesn't instantly transform him into Saul Goodman, the transformation is not complete until Kim's departure, but when Chuck tips over the lantern, the die is cast. Jimmy needs a way to suppress the pain. Saul Goodman is the solution. After Kim watches Jimmy use fake grief to get his law license back, she has two options. She can leave right then and there because Jimmy's refusal to confront Chuck's death is evidently corrupting him, or she can learn to live with this new Saul Goodman. She chooses the latter because Saul Goodman, as it turns out, is a lot of fun, and on top of that, his loose morals are very helpful for defending the little guy. We all know how this decision ends for Kim. Bullets, brains, breakup. And after she leaves, the Saul Goodman dosage must be cranked up to numb the pain. Jimmy McGill overdoses on the persona, and Saul Goodman is all that's left. Those are the two stories in short. Jimmy becomes Saul to escape the pain of losing Chuck and Kim, Walt becomes Heisenberg to take revenge on those who he believes prevented him from becoming his ideal self, revenge in the form of becoming the anti-Elliot. This distinction is best shown in the scene between Walt and Jimmy in the series finale of Better Call Saul. Saul hides from his regrets, Walter alters them to fit his resentment-based narrative.
Hey, maybe we could just unplug it? Or cut a wire or something?
Oh, listen, I see no reason to stay down here without hot water when it's something that I can easily fix. Aha!
It's human nature to blame others for our own shortcomings and internalize regrets, so Jimmy and Walter were sailing against the wind. But what could have they done differently to avoid their disastrous endings? We could trace their problems all the way back to the beginning. If Jimmy's dad acts more courageously and stands up to the hustlers, Jimmy never develops a fondness for their lifestyle. Walter's insecurities are never explained completely, but I think they go back to growing up without his father, who died when he was young. Jimmy could not change his father's behavior, and Walter couldn't cure his father's disease, but those misfortunes did not set their futures in stone. The solution emphasized by the writers in both shows is self-knowledge. At the end of Walter's life, he admits to Skyler that he embraced Heisenberg because he liked it. His actions were purely selfish. Jimmy does the same by admitting to the court of law and Kim that his life as Saul was motivated by greed, and more importantly, that the death of Chuck was partly his fault. Unfortunately, these admissions of guilt happen too late. There's already a trail of destruction behind both of them. But both men were given chances to accelerate the admission process. Following Chuck's death, Kim suggests to Jimmy that he should try therapy, but he decides not to. Howard, on the other hand, does go to therapy and ends up recovering quite well. Now, Jimmy doesn't seem like a person who could take therapy sessions seriously, so maybe he would have failed. But Jimmy doesn't talk about Chuck's death with anyone, not even Kim. He allows the regret to fester and eventually puts Saul Goodman in charge of containing it. A few hours of vulnerable conversation could have prevented that defense method. Walter's situation was trickier. Kim knew there was something off with Jimmy. Skyler didn't pay enough attention to Walter to notice how unfulfilled he was. Without the cancer diagnosis, Walter likely would have quietly drifted through the remainder of his life. He could have been more open about his frustration, and maybe that would have helped, but there was a separate force presented in Breaking Bad that had the potential to resist the Heisenberg impulse. When Walter learns that Crazy 8 took a piece of broken plate and was plotting to kill him, he writes down the reasons for killing him and not killing him. The rationale in favor of killing him is pretty strong. He'll kill you and your family. But the opposite side of the list is more interesting. He puts down that it's the moral thing to do, Judeo-Christian principles, and that he's not a killer. As Walter continues down the road to Kingpin status, a sense that he wronged a higher power follows him, which is represented by the teddy bear eye. There's no evidence that Walter ever had a solid belief in something greater than himself. Those are just the moral assumptions of his culture, so this feeling is not strong enough to prevent Walter from pursuing his empire. It just lingers in the back of his mind. Family is a powerful consideration for Jimmy and Walter, as it would be for almost everyone. But there's value in having constraints disassociated from other humans and material well being, because both things can vanish rather quickly, as Walt and Jimmy find out. Finding a higher power is a common step in addiction recovery for a reason. It helps people find purpose and let go of their mistakes, and it can help you realize that you're not alone in your troubles. All of those benefits would have been extremely helpful to Walt and Jimmy, especially in regards to self forgiveness. Obviously, Breaking Bad wouldn't be as compelling a show if Walter gave up cooking meth in season 3 and became a practicing Muslim, but for our own lives that don't bring AMC 5 million viewers a week, finding a higher purpose, whatever it may be, can be very beneficial. Even though the Breaking Bad universe has ended and Vince Gilligan has moved on to new projects, Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul will never stop being an infinite well of laughs and psychological truths. Just gathering clips for this video made me want to rewatch both shows, because sometimes you just want to relive the magic over and over again. If you want more Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul content, check out this playlist. If you really need a laugh, you can make a list of all my failed predictions about Better Call Saul Season 6. And if you're just really into movies and TV, subscribe on your way out, because that is what this channel is all about. I'll talk to you soon, guys. Take care.